Alright guys, and welcome to another video. Today I want to speculate a little bit about how the class meta will change in Fresh Classic WoW with all of the new changes to raids. By the way guys, if you want to help the channel, please throw me a quick sub. You may think you are subscribed to the channel, but you might not actually be because YouTube likes to recommend videos to people even though they're not subscribed. But anyway, let's jump in. So obviously the three very interesting changes to raids, first of all, are the removed debuff limit, removing world buffs, and the fact that raids are actually in fact becoming more difficult with certain mechanics being restored. So I think the first point we have to address is the fact that the raids are becoming more difficult. Now the problem with this is it may actually encourage guilds to go down more of a min-maxing route because the raids are more difficult, and therefore you have to put in the extra effort to actually, put the bosses down effectively and efficiently. So despite the meme specs becoming a little bit more viable because they can apply certain debuffs, they may still be chosen less, basically the exact same as Classic WoW, because of the player's attitude towards certain classes. But will the top dog classes actually change? What new classes will be stacked? Will the classes that were previously stacked be stacked less? Will certain classes be stacked more? Who knows? Firstly, let's take a little look at the debuff limit. Now, how will that affect individual classes? First of all, we have the Warlock. Now, Warlocks do get threat capped if they get really lucky with Shadowbolt crits, 2 in a row for instance. So the SM Ruin spec may become more viable because every single Warlock in a raid will be able to apply Corruption, which will generate less threat. But I think this spec will only be more powerful than DS Ruin when you have a low amount of crit chance on your gear and when DS Ruin becomes threat capped. Because obviously you're going to lose a lot of DPS when you physically have to stop casting in order for your threat to drop down. So if you can just continue to cast and pump with SM Ruin, but you can't with DS Ruin, then maybe SM Ruin will be slightly stronger. A Ret Paladin will be able to maintain their Seal of the Crusader Judgment debuff on the boss, but I'm not really sure how much of a DPS increase that is really going to be for a Retribution Paladin. The highest DPS on the logs I've seen for a Retribution Paladin fully world buff is 725 DPS, whereas a warrior can hit over 2k, so I don't think that's exactly going to be game breaking. A Thorough Druid will be able to use Rake on the target, but again I don't think that's going to be game breaking. Shamans can use their Storm Strike ability without a risk of it removing other debuffs. However, you probably won't actually be able to make use of a debuff yourself because rogue poisons consume the debuff. So maybe Blizzard could have fixed that. It would make Enhancement Shaman a little bit better. However, certain mobs are immune to rogue poisons, but normally when the mob is immune to rogue poisons, it's also going to be immune to nature damage, so that's also kind of an issue. And the same goes for an Elemental Shaman, like a lot of the mobs are simply immune to nature damage. Balanced Druids will be able to use their Moonfire, so that'll be an extra little bit of DPS. Warriors will be able to more easily apply Deep Wounds, so their DPS will probably actually increase because they won't be popping off each other's Deep Wounds. They'll also be able to use Mortal Strike, although I'm not really sure whether Mortal Strike and Sword spec will be stronger than, Deep Fury, Bloodthirst and Flurry spec. So actually, in a weird way, I think Warriors will actually get more DPS because of being able to more easily apply Deep Wounds. A Rogue will be able to go Hemo build, that's more just a support spec really to increase the melee DPS of all the other melee DPS in the raid. Hunters will be able to use Serpent Sting, so at least the Hunter rotation will be somewhat a little more interesting. Shadow Priests will be able to use their dots, and it'll also be interesting guys if they changed how a Fire Mage's Ignite works to be player specific rather than shared between all of the Fire Mages in the raid, because that might boost a Fire Mage's individual DPS, because obviously when Ignite procs it's normally just puts one Fire Mage on top of the meters. Overall, that is everything that will become possible with the total removal of a debuff limit, but I'm not honestly sure whether the removed debuff limit is really enough to make meme specs compete with the main specs, since the real issue isn't really the amount of debuffs that a particular spec can apply, it's the fact that these specs numerically just deal less damage, or they can't benefit from gear as much as the main specs, or they run out of mana far too easily. When it comes to the removal of world buffs, now this will likely nerf a number of classes that heavily rely on crits. So, for instance, a Fury Warrior, whenever they crit, they gain their little flurry buff, which, you know, is a big boost to their DPS, and obviously their rage generation as well. So this will likely, you know, make playing a warrior a little bit more painful. It will probably nerf them to the point where they are just obviously not ludicrously overpowered like they were by the time of Naxxramas rolling up. So it may balance the classes a little more, you know, there may be more in power with a rogue and a mage. So, you know, the top three classes, you know, which is basically rogue, fire mage, and a warrior, they may be slightly more balanced, but again, with the nerf to warrior, it may boost another class, you know, who knows what, you know, ends up happening in the future. And what will likely happen is there will be a new DPS that becomes the top dog DPS because it's able to do really good DPS without world buffs, and then that class probably just gets stacked instead. But who knows, guys, you know, maybe things will change a little bit. If we're lucky, Blizzard will give us access to every single raid tier on the beta, you know, with some like gear that we can, you know, test the classes more properly when the beta does finally come out, and then we can see, you know, how the meta is going to shift, whether some classes are going to become less powerful or more powerful. But I honestly think that not much will change unless they actually bother to introduce significant class changes. Apart from warriors just being less overpowered. Maybe if they introduced certain abilities and talents that were added in TBC, or at least the talents that were reworked. Like a classic example of this is how the warlock talents, you know, in the demonology tree, they would increase, in classic WoW, they would increase your pet's mana, and that was it. But in TBC, they would also increase your mana and the pet's mana. And then another example would be giving a Retribution Paladin a Crusader Strike, or giving a Shadow Priest Vampiric Touch so that they wouldn't go oomed so incredibly quickly, and obviously the utility that Vampiric Touch brings to a raid would justify having a Shadow Priest in your raid rather than just having a Shadow Priest for the Shadow Weaving debuff. I'm not sure whether the mild changes that are happening to Classic Fresh are really enough to make it significantly exciting. They're just really removing all the stuff that we didn't like. So overall, I don't think it's going to be that much of a fresh and new exciting experience, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, unless they add more significant changes to the classes. But who knows, guys? I mean, they're literally releasing a beta within a few hours of me recording this video. That either means that they want to release an early beta to get as much good feedback from players as possible from when it comes to changes and everything like that, or they're trying to push it really quickly because they've lost a lot of subscribers from TBC Classic. Let's be honest, that has happened, and they're trying to push it out as fast as possible, you know, to make basically more bones. But anyway, only time will tell. My name is MetaGoblin. This is my next video. Ciao.